Greetings, beloved. My name is Reverend Michael Malcolm. I am the founder and executive director of the People's Justice Council, as well as executive director of Alabama Interfaith Power and Light. And today is a special day because not only do I have my co-host, but I've also got my special guest, which is Kyle Crider. Kyle Crider is the program and policy director for the PJC, as well as Alabama Interfaith Power and Light. I'll let Kyle introduce himself as well as introduce our topic today.
Thank you, Reverend. Again, very happy to be here with PJC and ALIPL as we throw out those acronyms all the time. What the heck is GIS? It stands for Geographic Information Systems. That's what we're going to be talking about today. And instead of a big fancy term like that, just think Google Maps, because we're going to be talking about asset mapping, among other things. And maps, like Google Maps, is a very important tool for asset mapping. We're also going to be talking about another tool, one of my favorites, called mind mapping, and we'll actually walk you through some demonstrations of how you can use these tools. And the best part, all the tools we're going to be showing you are free. So it doesn't matter what your organization's budget is. If you have access to the internet and you got a computer, you can use these tools in your organizations.
Man, that's awesome.
This is an example of a completed free mind map, this one on the subject of computer knowledge. And this is another example showing you the many options available for freeform, colors, icons. You can get very creative with your designs.
So, Cal, you talked about mind mapping. Now, the next mapping is Google Mapping. Can you tell us about Google Mapping, not just what it is, but what we can actually do with it as well?
Oh, yeah, Rev. I'm an old GIS geek, and as I said in the introduction, GIS is a big fancy word. It means Geographic Information Systems, but to you and me, it means maps. And I like Google Maps because they're powerful, they're free. So I'll actually be walking you through a demo of Google Maps, but for most folks that have used Google Maps at all, they probably plotted an address and physically placed a pin on a map by typing an address, and Google locates that spot on the map, and you can put a pin there. And that's great if you've got one or two or three places you want to map, but what if, we're doing asset mapping for a coalition of organizations throughout the Southeast and even across the U.S. So you don't want people having to manually place 40, 50, 60 pins on a map.
Right.
What I'm about to show you is how easy it is for you to become a GIS geek like I am. You can take a spreadsheet, which most people already know how to use, a spreadsheet of, say, street addresses, and Google Maps can automatically map those for you. No manually typing each address and plotting each pin on the map. It is really simple. It's a couple of clicks of the mouse, in fact, if you've got your information already in the spreadsheet like you want it. But in the real world, sometimes we don't have, or sometimes we might not necessarily even want to map to individual street addresses. What if we just want to place pins on cities or counties, or the example I'll show you is zip codes, which raises an interesting question. Where does it put the pin in a zip code? Because if you've seen zip code maps, zip codes are these weird, scraggly shapes.
Right.
So how does Google Maps place the pin? Well, without getting too technical, Google makes that easy too. However weird your shape is, like a zip code, Google is going to try to figure out what the center of that shape is and put the pin right there. And that's the example I'm about to show you. I'll show you a list of assets, organizations that we have only a zip code, and we need to put pins on a map for that. And I'll show you how easy that is.
Wow.
I'm going to show you how easy it is to create an online map. We're using Google My Maps. That is, you go to mymaps.google.com and create a new map. First thing I'm going to do is click on the title of the map, and we'll change the title to Asset Mapping Example, or the title of your choice. As you saw, you could also enter a description there. And then you'll see that the import option is available. That's exactly what we want to do. It says we can import from a CSV file, that's comma separated values, a spreadsheet, or KML, another map file. Most of us are used to using spreadsheet data. So I'll click import, and I happen to have a spreadsheet that I want to map. It's a zip code example. So we're seeing the column headings of that spreadsheet file. And it says choose the columns to position your place marks. Well, we want to position our markers by zip code. Now, this might have been a file that contained a full street address, either in a single column, the full address in one single column, or split up, a column for city, a column for state, a column for zip. If that was the case, we could choose multiple columns. But in this case, we just want to go by zip code. So what we're telling Google My Maps is to use our zip code column to position our map marker, our pin, or our place mark. So I'm going to hit continue. And how do we want to title our markers? Well, we'd also like to see by zip code. We'll get into post office name, which corresponds to the zip code shortly. I'm going to hit finish. And congratulations, it is that easy to automatically put pins on a map from a spreadsheet, even if your spreadsheet lacks a complete street address or something even fancier like latitude and longitude, which is how these pins are actually placed on the map. So what Google has done is translated our zip code into a pin, and the pin is placed according to latitude and longitude. It does all those geographic conversions for you. And if you're wondering, since a zip code is this oddly shaped area on the map, where does it put the pin? Well, it tries to find the center of however oddly shaped your zip code area is. And so, for example, this pin here on the left, corresponding to zip 36756, or roughly Marion, Alabama, that pin is placed in the geographic center of the 36756 zip code shape on the map. And you'll see that after the import, the layer has automatically been renamed. We'll just call this zip codes to make it a little easier to read. So that's how easy it is to create a map without having to individually put pins for each location you want to map. And these could have been mapped to exact street addresses. So like, again, if your spreadsheet contains complete street addresses, you get even more specific. But maybe you don't want to be that specific. If you're dealing with health data, you need to anonymize, sanitize the data. And so in the past, I've done things like mapping to the nearest intersection for a street address to make sure that people's privacy isn't invaded. Well, in this case, like I say, these pins correspond to zip code areas. This one, 35072. So a helpful map, it's got all the standard map features. We can zoom in, we can zoom out, we can grab it and pan it. And of course, click on any node, any pin, to see the information underlying that came from our spreadsheet file. But let's make this even more useful, since this is an asset mapping example. You see that we have uniform style over here. Let's click that and investigate it. And let's change it to style by data column. And I'm going to choose, for purposes of this, our spreadsheet also contained columns for population and square miles. We want to, in this case, format, I could use either one of these values to make the map more interesting and more useful. I'm going to start with population. And we want this to be a range. When I click range, it defaults to 4 integrals, or 4 increments of that range. And it defaults to a blue color scheme. I happen to like, since this is a heat map, we're going to make this a red color scheme. So what does this mean? Well, let's look at a brightly colored dot. Up here, we see that Sylacauga, 35151 zip code, has a population of 6,728 folks living therein. Let's compare that to, say, 35183, Weogufka, which only has 803. So what, with a few simple clicks, and we see our map legend over here to make it even more useful. So we can now see at a glance how hot our data is. That is, the increasing red color of the pins corresponds to a higher population for that zip code. And it also says that one row couldn't be shown on the map. I'm going to dismiss that. Your data is probably not going to be perfect, and you can open the data table to see what the problem is. I won't get into those weeds right now. For now, I'll just dismiss it, but the moral of the story is your data doesn't have to be perfect the first time. Google will do the best it can with whatever data it is able to map. There's other options here, including changing the base map. That is whatever the background of the map is, looks like. And we can make this much fancier and more useful, but that is how easy it is to create a heat map in Google My Maps.
So, Cal, in GIS mapping, we talk about mind mapping. Not only do I want you to go in and tell us about mind mapping or how it actually works, but also tell us how it actually could work practically for us in community.
Thank you, Rev. So yeah, as Rev says, the first tool I want to share with you is a mind mapping tool. Now, when we think about brainstorming, one of the first things you need to do when you're mapping the assets of any organization is just brainstorm. You know, who do we know? What do we have? What are the power connections? All these kinds of things. And so a lot of folks are used to making an outline or just making notes on paper. But there's also I teach college classes, and I actually encourage my students to doodle while I'm lecturing, because unlike sitting there and checking email on your phone, when you're doodling, your brain is actually very engaged and is probably picking up more information than if you were sitting there recording every word. And so think of a mind map as a doodle. And it's less structured than an outline. It's a lot easier to rearrange things, which is why I like doing it on the computer. I'm going to be showing you a free tool called FreeMind, and this tool allows you to brainstorm in a doodle form, and you will see nodes and linkages, so little bubbles that are connected by lines, and you can get very fancy with this. But the whole idea is flexibility and brainstorming to help your creative process, with the end goal of identifying the assets of your organization. And I have to walk you through that.
Wow, thank you.
There are many excellent free mind mapping tools available, both online on the web and available locally for your PC, Mac, or other smart device. I'm using an application called FreeMind, and I'm running this on my PC as a local application, but yeah, you will find that most mind mapping applications look and function very similarly to this one. When we open FreeMind, what we have is a blank map with a single central node. First thing I'm going to do is change the view so that hopefully you can see this a little easier on your screens. The central node is called New Mind Map by default. I'm going to click it, backspace, and we're going to call this Asset Mapping for purposes of our demonstration. Now, if you're brainstorming, feel free to start with whatever central idea you prefer. I'm going to right-click to see the options on the central node, and we'll see two key functions that will probably work the same, use the same keystroke shortcut on any mind mapping application. These are fairly standard. For example, you hit enter generally to create a new sibling node, or insert to create a new child node on just about any mind mapping application you want. Or you can simply click, and here we have our new child node, same as hitting the insert key. We'll call this child asset A for purposes of our example. So I'm just typing on the node and hitting the enter key to finish typing. And you may recall from the central node, enter creates a new sibling node. So if I've just hit enter to close asset A mapping and I hit enter again, we create a new sibling node. That is a new node at the same level of the node we just left, a brother or sister node, if you will, a sibling. We'll call this asset B. Enter again, asset C. And what does the insert do? It creates a new child node. So if I hit the insert key here on asset C, we have asset D that is now a child of asset C. And as you see, you can expand and contract whole sections of your tree. Now for brainstorming, we're not going to get it right the first time. What if I rethink this and say that asset D is better depicted as a child of asset mapping? Well, it's as easy as dragging and dropping. So we can rearrange our mind map just this easily by dragging a node and dropping it on another node. And we can rearrange parents, siblings, and children this way. That is it in a nutshell. Now there's all sorts of additional options here. For example, if you right click, you will see the option to add an icon on a node. We have the option to format a node, font size, color, all of these. So I will stop here because you've already learned the basics. Enter to create a new sibling node, a node that is a node at the same level of the node you've just created, or insert to create a new child node. And what might this lead to? Well, we're about to show you. This is an example of a completed FreeMind mind map, this one on the subject of computer knowledge. And this is another example showing you the many options available for freeform, colors, icons. You can get very creative with your designs.
So Kyle, one of the things about GIS mapping that truly interests me is putting it into the lens and context of houses of worship or congregations being able to become citizen scientists. So what if they were to use these tools that we've provided to asset map some of the conditions that are going on in their communities, and they activated their congregation as citizen scientists, and they use these tools to pinpoint what is the source of the illnesses in their community. So take a place like North Birmingham that is historically polluted. It has legacy pollution, and no one has really pinpointed from a citizen science standpoint, pinpointed the places that are ill in this community. What would it look like for congregations in that community to activate themselves as citizen science and collect this data using this tool to bring about change and create policy that protects people?
Yes, sir, Rev. Gosh, there's so many things I'd like to say here, but I'll start with the good news is we might not have to reinvent the wheel. You're absolutely right. We need a lot more information, and hopefully I'm showing you how easy some of the tools are to use. But the good news is there's already a lot of really good information out there. We just have to amplify its voice, use it, put it to use. For example, the EPA has this TRI, the Toxics Release Inventory. The EPA, particularly in the past, did some really good justice mapping exercises, and that information is still available. Although right now we're a little worried about the politicization of the science, and we're worried that some of those tools may not be here tomorrow. So use them today while seize the day. Use them while we have them.
Thank you. Well, listen, we thank you for joining us today. We thank you, and we hope that these tools that we've provided for you could help to fight for justice at the policy level. Today, we offer to you love, peace, and light.